Welcome to Life Stories Network. Today, I want to share with you a story that is deeply personal, emotional, and one that still makes my heart ache every time I think about it. It's the story of chasing a dream, believing in the power of family, and facing the kind of heartbreak that no success can truly prepare you for. This is my story of opening my dream book Café, a place I had imagined since I was a child, and what happened when I invited my parents to the grand opening, only for them not to show up. For as long as I can remember, books were my escape. Growing up, I didn't have the warmest or happiest family life. My parents weren't cruel, but they were distant. My father always believed life was about hard work and practicality, while my mother thought dreams were nothing but distractions. Whenever I tried to tell them I wanted to write or that I loved reading, they brushed it aside as a childish hobby. Still, I held on to that vision. One day, I would have a place where people who loved books as much as I did could gather, drink coffee, and feel like they belonged. I worked harder than I ever thought I could. I took part-time jobs while in college. I saved every cent I could manage. I stayed up late at night, researching how to start a business, how to manage costs, and how to create a warm space that would feel like home for people who had none. Slowly, it all came together. There were setbacks, of course. Some nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was being foolish, wondering if my parents were right when they told me to get real. But that dream was the only thing that kept me going, so I never let go. Finally, after years of scraping and saving, after endless nights of doubt, the cafe was real. The shelves lined with books smelled of fresh pages and coffee beans, the walls painted in warm colors, the chairs cozy and inviting. Every corner of that little shop carried a piece of me, my heart, my struggles, my late nights, and my hope. I called it Chapter 1 Café, because I wanted everyone who walked through those doors to feel like they were beginning a new chapter of their life. As the grand opening day approached, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. I wanted everything to be perfect. I planned the menu carefully. I arranged the books in ways that felt welcoming. I even wrote little handwritten notes and tucked them inside random books with words of encouragement like, "You are enough," or "Keep going, you're stronger than you think." It wasn't just a business to me. It was my soul laid bare for the world to see. There was one thing I wanted most of all. I wanted my parents to be proud of me. No matter how many times they had dismissed my dreams, I still hoped they would see what I had built and finally understand me. So I sent them a personal invitation. I called them both. I said, "Please, this means everything to me. I want you there when I cut the ribbon. I want you to see what your child has made." They said little in return, but they didn't say no. That was enough for me to hold on to hope. On the morning of the opening, I woke up with my heart racing. I dressed in my best clothes, my hands shaking as I tied the apron with my cafe's logo on it. Friends came, neighbors came, even strangers walking by stopped in to see what the excitement was about. There were flowers, balloons, and laughter in the air. People complimented the cafe, told me how beautiful it looked, how cozy and inviting it felt. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of true happiness. But as the hours passed, my eyes kept darting to the door. Each time it opened, my heart leapt, hoping it would be them, hoping to see my father's serious face soften into a smile, hoping to hear my mother say, "I'm proud of you." But every time it was someone else, a friend, a customer, a stranger with a curious smile, not them. I told myself they were just late. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe they were surprising me by coming together. I forced myself to keep smiling, greeting guests, cutting the ribbon, making speeches. Everyone clapped, everyone cheered, and yet deep down I felt a hollow ache that grew heavier with each passing minute. By the end of the night, when the crowd had thinned and the last guest had left, I sat alone at one of the tables, surrounded by the smell of coffee and silence. My parents had never shown up. Not a text, not a call, not even an excuse. The realization hit me harder than I can explain. They didn't care enough to come. They didn't see me. They didn't value what I had built, and maybe they never would. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt numb. The laughter of the day echoed in my mind, but it was drowned out by the emptiness in my heart. My dream had come true, but it felt incomplete without them. I had achieved everything I promised myself I would, and yet I still felt like a little child, waiting for her parents' approval. That night, sitting in the cafe I had built with my own 2 hands, I realized something painful but necessary. Sometimes, the people you want most to believe in you never will. And sometimes, family isn't about blood, it's about the people who actually show up for you, the ones who cheer for you when no one else does. I closed the cafe late, turning off the lights one by one, my shadow stretching across the floor. My dream was alive, but so was my heartbreak. And as I walked home, I knew that this was just the beginning of a different kind of chapter, one I hadn't expected but one I needed to face. The next morning, I walked back into the cafe with a heavy heart. The sunlight streamed in through the windows, casting golden patterns across the wooden tables. Everything looked exactly as I had dreamed, yet inside me, it felt hollow. I had stayed up most of the night, replaying the same thought in my head, wondering why my parents didn't come. Was it really that hard for them to support me for just one day? The questions gnawed at me like tiny knives. But when I opened the doors, the little bell above chimed, and the first customer of the day walked in with a smile. A young woman holding a worn-out book in her hands. She told me she had heard about the opening and wanted to see it for herself. I made her a cup of cappuccino, and she sat down by the window, losing herself in her book. Watching her, I felt a spark of comfort. My cafe was serving its purpose. Even if my parents hadn't shown up, strangers had, and they were finding joy here. Soon, more people trickled in. Some brought laptops, some just wanted to sip coffee, and others browsed through the shelves of books. A group of teenagers even gathered in a corner, excitedly pulling out fantasy novels and swapping recommendations. Their laughter filled the space in a way that reminded me why I had done this in the first place. My cafe was alive, it was real. Still, there was an emptiness I couldn't shake. During a quiet moment, I sat at the counter, sipping my own coffee. My phone sat on the table next to me, silent and cold. Not a single message from my parents, not a word to ask how it went, or even to pretend they cared. That silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Later that day, one of my close friends, Emily, stopped by. She had been one of the loudest cheerleaders for me during this entire journey. She noticed the sadness in my eyes and asked what was wrong. I told her, my voice cracking, that my parents never came. She took my hand and said softly, "Maybe they'll never understand what this means to you, but look around. You've created something beautiful, something people already love. You've done this without them, and that makes it even more powerful." Her words comforted me, but only for a while. Deep down, I still longed for that missing piece. That longing for parental approval is something you never really grow out of, no matter how old you get. Even when you achieve everything you dreamed of, there's a small child inside you hoping to be seen, hoping to be loved without conditions. That night, after closing up again, I scrolled through my phone, looking at old photos of me and my parents. There weren't many. Most of them were stiff family gatherings with smiles that felt forced. But there was one picture that stood out. I was about 7 years old, holding a stack of library books in my tiny arms. I had the biggest grin on my face. My parents were in the background, distracted, not even looking at me. That picture said it all. Even back then, books were my joy, and even back then, they didn't notice. The following weeks, the cafe grew busier. Word spread through the community. Local students came to study. Writers held small gatherings. Book lovers formed little clubs and started meeting regularly at my place. Slowly, the walls of Chapter 1 Café soaked in laughter, stories, and the warmth of strangers who were becoming like family. Each day, I heard people say things like, "This place feels so cozy," or "I've never felt so at home in a cafe." Their words were like little drops of healing filling the cracks in my heart. But there were still nights when I would close the cafe and sit in the silence, staring at the empty doorway, wishing it had been my parents walking through. Sometimes I thought about calling them again, begging them to just come and see what I had made. But then I stopped myself. I was tired of begging for love that should have been given freely. One evening, an older man came into the cafe. He ordered a simple black coffee and sat near the back, quietly reading. After a while, he came to the counter to pay, and he said something that nearly brought me to tears. He said, "This place, it feels like it was made by someone who understands loneliness. Thank you for creating it." His words hit me deeply because they were true. I had poured my loneliness, my longing, and my dreams into every brick and every corner of that cafe, and somehow people felt it. Maybe that was why they kept coming back. Because it wasn't just a business, it was a safe space built out of heartbreak and hope. Still, I kept wondering about my parents. Did they ever talk about me? Did they ever feel even a shred of guilt for ignoring what mattered most to me? Or were they so stuck in their own beliefs that they didn't even think twice about it? Those questions haunted me, but I knew I might never get answers. Months passed. The cafe thrived. I made enough to not only cover expenses, but to start planning for expansion. A second location was already in my mind. My friends celebrated with me, my customers became regulars, and I built a little family within those walls. But in quiet moments, I still felt the sting of that empty chair, the one I had saved for my parents on opening night. One night after closing, I finally let myself cry. I cried for the child inside me who had begged for approval. I cried for all the birthdays and graduations where my parents never clapped for me. I cried for the person I had become, strong and successful, yet still carrying scars of rejection. And when the tears dried, I felt lighter, because I realized something powerful. I didn't need them to validate me anymore. I didn't need their applause to prove my worth. My life was proof enough. My cafe was proof enough. The people who came every day, the smiles I saw, the comfort I gave them, that was worth more than any nod from parents who had never really been there for me. From that night on, I stopped waiting for them. I stopped leaving space for their absence. Instead, I decided to fill that space with love for myself and for the community I had built, and little by little, the pain turned into strength. The day I truly understood my own strength came on the 1-year anniversary of Chapter 1 Café. I had spent the week decorating, planning small events, and inviting everyone who had supported me since the beginning. Writers, students, friends, neighbors, people who had turned my dream into a living, breathing community. I wanted to celebrate not just the cafe, but the people who had made it so much more than I imagined. That morning, as I arranged fresh flowers on the tables, I thought briefly of my parents. A small part of me still wished they might appear. That maybe they would surprise me on this milestone, but deep down, I already knew better. They had chosen not to be a part of my journey, and I couldn't force them into it. So instead of saving a chair for them, I filled every space with people who had been there for me all along. The celebration was beautiful. Local musicians played soft acoustic songs, kids giggled in the reading corner, and I saw smiles everywhere I looked. People hugged me, congratulated me, and told me how much the cafe meant to them. One woman even said, "This place saved me during a dark time. Thank you for giving us a home." Her words made my throat tighten. That was exactly what I had dreamed of when I was younger, creating a place that healed. At one point, I stepped outside, away from the noise, just to breathe. I looked at the glowing sign of Chapter 1 Café above the door, and I let myself feel proud. Proud without conditions, without waiting for anyone else to say it. For the first time, I didn't imagine my parents walking in. I didn't ache for their approval. I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had built something meaningful, and that was enough. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat at one of the tables with a cup of tea, the cafe dimly lit, quiet and peaceful. I thought back to that little girl holding books bigger than her arms, smiling even when no one noticed. I thought about all the times I almost gave up, all the nights I doubted myself, and I thought about how far I had come, from being dismissed and underestimated to creating a business that touched lives. I whispered softly into the silence, "You did it." In the months that followed, the cafe only grew stronger. I started hosting book readings, open mic nights, and community events. People began calling it a second home. Writers launched their books here. Students found mentors. Strangers became friends. Every single story that passed through my doors reminded me that I wasn't just running a cafe. I was building a legacy. My parents never came. Not for the anniversary, not for any other event. Sometimes the thought still stung, but it no longer broke me. I stopped waiting for a day when they would suddenly change. Instead, I learned to let go of the hope that weighed me down. Some people simply can't give the love you deserve, no matter how much you want it from them. One evening, I sat down with Emily, my friend who had been there from the start. She smiled at me over her latte and said, "Do you realize what you've done? You've created the family you always wanted, right here, and they show up for you every single day." Her words sank deep into me. She was right. Family is not always about blood. Sometimes family is the people who believe in you when no one else does. I began to see my story in a different light. Yes, my parents' absence hurt, but it also shaped me. Their lack of support forced me to stand on my own, to fight for what I believed in, and to carve out a place in the world that was entirely mine. Without their rejection, maybe I wouldn't have fought so hard to prove myself. Maybe I wouldn't have built something so meaningful. Over time, the pain turned into gratitude, not gratitude for their absence, but for the strength I found in myself because of it. And as I watched my cafe thrive, I realized this was the lesson I wanted to share with anyone who felt unseen or unloved. You don't need everyone's approval to live your dream. You just need your own belief, your own fire, and the courage to keep going even when no one claps for you. Today, when I unlock the doors each morning, I smile. I smile because I know this place is more than just tables and books. It's proof that dreams can survive even the deepest heartbreak. It's proof that when one kind of family fails you, you can create another. And it's proof that no matter how alone you feel, your story matters. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt abandoned, dismissed, or invisible, I want you to hear me. You are not defined by the people who fail to see you. You are defined by the way you rise anyway, by the way you turn pain into purpose, loneliness into connection, and rejection into resilience. So yes, my parents never showed up to my grand opening, and maybe they never will. But every day since then, others have walked through those doors, and they've shown me something more powerful than approval. They've shown me belonging, they've shown me love, and that, I've realized, was the dream all along.